mutual betterment of our allied companies, customers, shareholders, and employees. Tide pledges to always hold our management philosophy and values at heart. Until now, the meter readers have had to do manual meter reading. This existing manual process is time and money consuming work. This makes it hard for us to detect blackout and manage energy demands. And it makes us hard to manage loss during transmission and distribution. Intelligent AMI solutions will solve many problems from the existing manual process. We can reduce time and money spent metering manually. We can manage blackout and loss during distribution. We can do demand response, TOU. Finally, we can make grid smarter. AMI service. Meter reading information of household is call-cited by modem and DCU. There are two types of smart meter, internal and external. Smart meter sends metering data to modem via serial communication. Modem sends metering data to DCU. A hidden champion in the energy IoT solution industry. Tide. Strongly believes the importance of environment protection and energy efficiency in order to achieve a sustainable future for mankind. Thus, our technological commitment will foster mutual betterment of our allied companies, customers, shareholders, and employees. Tide pledges to always hold our management philosophy and values at heart. Until now, the meter readers have had to do manual meter reading. This existing manual process is time and money consuming work. This makes it hard for us to detect blackout and manage energy demands. and it makes it hard to manage loss during transmission and distribution. As a result, this existing manual process makes grid unsmarter. But TOT's end-to-end AMI solutions will connect the user with utility companies. TOT's intelligent AMI solutions will solve many problems from the existing manual process. We can reduce time and money spent metering manually. We can manage blackout and loss during distribution. We can do demand response, TOU. Finally, we can make grid smarter. AMI service. Meter reading information of household is call-seated by modem and DCU. There are two types of smart meter, internal and external. Smart meter sends metering data to modem via serial communication. Modem sends metering data to DCU via PLC communication. DCU sends metering data to server via fiber optic and cellular network. On-time monitoring and detection of electrical loss. TOU, time of USC flexible tariffs. Connectivity to electric vehicle charging system. Connection of renewable energy and battery with bidirectional metering. Reliable collection rate improving monitoring of power quality. Making grid smarter and more efficient. A hidden champion in the energy IoT solution industry. Tide.
The various stakeholders in the French smart grid sector may be found on this diagram: network management and operations. These solutions deliver cost savings and technical improvements to networks. New uses. These solutions encompass e-mobility, smart homes and smart buildings. Of the prosumer. Prosumers are active participants in the energy market thanks to smart meters and self-consumption. Integration of renewable resources. These solutions help manage the challenge of renewable energy intermittency. Use of data. Energy data is put to use to offer new services to consumers and local authorities. Research and expertise. Members of this sector offer smart grid-related training and consultancy services. France, including overseas departments and collectivities, aims to generate 32% of the energy it consumes from renewable sources by 2030. Since 2008, 121 pilot demonstration projects around the country have helped hone France's expertise in smart grid operational technologies and features. From 2008 to 2014, €500 million has been invested in R&D, putting France top of the European League. Now, this experience and the French government's call for proposals for large-scale smart grid projects has resulted in projects being rolled out in several regions by the successful applicants: FlexGrid, UNGrid and Smile. These smart grid projects span several regions and focus upon the 6 key aspects of the French smart grid sector, promoting French expertise in this field on the international stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The webinar is about to begin. Honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. For those who joined the webinar from all around the world, especially in Indonesia. My name is Pradita Octavian Hadi as a lecturer and assistant professor at Institut Teknologi Bandung. On behalf of the Indonesian Electrical Power Society or Masyarakat Ketenagalistrikan Indonesia, MKI, I would like to welcome you all to the 6th episode of the webinar entitled Smart Microgrids, the Future of Sustainable Power, which is supported by PT PLN Persero and sponsored by Tide, Huawei, Capco, Hitachi ABB Power Grids, Siemens, ABB Sakti Industry, Trilliant, GE Grid Solutions, Wärtsilä, LS Electric, Mitsubishi Power, PT Indonesia Comnet Plus or Icon Plus, and in partnership with Think Smart Grids France, and also Energy Academy Indonesia or ECADIN. If your company is interested to be a sponsor or speaker in the next MKI Webinar Series on Smart Grid, feel free to contact us at mki.secrt@gmail.com or fill in the form that we have provided on our Zoom chat box. Okay, today's webinar is the 6th episode of MKI Smart Grid Webinar Series out of 10 episodes hosted by the Indonesian Electrical Power Society or Masyarakat Ketenagalistrikan Indonesia, MKI, taken place in April 2021 to January 2022. Motivated by many studies, confirm that smart microgrid systems are the key for flexible, techno-economic, and environmentally friendly generation units for reliable operation and cost-effective planning of smart electricity grids. Today's webinar will feature experts from around the world, especially in Indonesia, to share the latest advancement, benefits, and recent deployment of smart microgrids for the future of sustainable power. Okay, before we get started, I like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit the text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into Q&A box at any time during the presentation. If you are joining this webinar using YouTube, you could submit questions by typing it on the YouTube live chat too. Please mention your name and your organization and to whom the questions are posted. We will collect the questions and address them during our Q&A sessions. To be noted, there will be 2 Q&A sessions in this webinar. There will be a presence form posted on chat room in Zoom and live chat in YouTube. So please fill in. You will receive an e-certificate for this webinar participation via email within 7 working days at the latest. The webinar presentation materials will also be sent to your email. This webinar is also live streaming via YouTube channel MKI IEPS and remains there after this event finished. Okay, as a request from the organizing committee, we will have a photo session with all of the speakers. So please, all speakers, could you switch on your camera for a while? We will count down 3, 2, 1 for taking a picture. Okay. Are you ready? I will start to count. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, we would like to introduce our keynote speaker, which is Pak Syamsul Huda, as a Regional Business Director for Sulawesi, Maluku, Papua, and Nusa Tenggara at PT PLN Persero. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Pak Syamsul Huda to deliver the keynote speech on smart microgrid development in 3T areas. So, Pak Huda, the Zoom is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Best wishes to all of us. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. The Honorable Chairman of Indonesian Electrical Power Society, Mr. Wiloyo Kusduyarto, the Honorable Speakers on today's event, Mr. Edwin, Diender, Chief Innovation Officer, Global Energy Business, Huawei, Mrs. Architrandi, Priambodo, Senior Energy Specialist, Asian Development Bank, Mr. Muhammad Marwali, Energy Market Engineering Manager, Market Operation, New York, ISO. Mr. Fajar Sastrowijoyo, Co-founder and CEO Solar Syntek. Mr. Kevin Marojahan, Lecturer, Institut Teknologi, Bandung. And all participants that attend today's event, worldwide power utilities, international and local companies, power utility stakeholders in Indonesia, professional and associations, government institutions, students, lecturers, and researchers. First of all, let us praise and thanks Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because of His grace today, we can meet in the webinar series on smart grid, which entitled Smart Microgrids, the Future of Sustainable Power. Dear Mr. and Mrs., energy transition to zero carbon in 2060 is an effort to increase our nation's ability in building renewable energy industries and establish a better generation in the future. Energy transition is built not only based on certain policies, but also based on good innovation and renewable energy. So it is possible in the future to replace fossil fuel power plant, become renewable energy power plant as baseload. Renewable energy implementation should consider the balance between supply and demand. PLN as an electricity company in Indonesia support the development of renewable energy as long as it is aligned with corporate efficiency and financial performance. Dear Mr. and Mrs., RUBTL 2021 to 2030 is having green aspiration as a strategic basis to achieve zero carbon in 2060. PLN committed to achieve 23% renewable energy mix in 2025, replacing the development of steam coal power plant into renewable energy power plant as baseload, increasing variable renewable energy through solar power plant and wind power plant with battery energy storage system, and also retirement of 1.1 gigawatts subcritical steam coal power plant PLTU in 2030. Since 2020, PLN had been consistently running a transformation program. The transformation program consists of 4 pillars. They are green, lean, innovative, and customer focused. Through the green breakthroughs, PLN committed to increase the national green power plant capacity from 13.2% in 2020 to become 20% in 2024 and eventually become 23% in 2025. For the Sulawesi, Maluku, Papua, and Nusa Tenggara, or Sulmapana regional, in 2021, our renewable energy capacity has reached 20.49% of the total capacity, and renewable energy production has reached 20.52% from total gross production. Dear Mr. and Mrs., Sulmapana region consists of 9,550 islands with 416 islands inhabited. Some of the islands are remote areas with 3T status: terdepan, terluar, tertinggal. The electrification ratio of Sulmapana region in 2021 has reached 97.46%. Smart microgrid systems are the key for flexible, techno-economic, and environmentally friendly generation unit for reliable operation and cost-effective planning of smart electricity grid. Currently, there are 4 locations of EDB result-based lending smart grid pilot project in Sulmapana Regional. They are the first one, small hybrid power plant in East Nusa Tenggara with 450 kilowatt peak PV capacity, 2,880 kilowatt hour battery capacity, and already achieved COD in November 2020. The second one, Medang hybrid power plant in West Nusa Tenggara with 314 kilowatt peak PV capacity, 550 kilowatt hour battery capacity, and will be achieving COD in January 2022. The third one, Sangi hybrid power plant in North Sulawesi with 1,300 kilowatt peak PV capacity, 870 kilowatt hour battery capacity, and will be achieving COD in December 2021. The last one, Selayar hybrid power plant in North Sulawesi with 1,300 kilowatt peak PV capacity, 870 kilowatt hour battery capacity, and will be achieving COD in December 2021. This hybrid power plant combine renewable energy sources, in this case solar power plant, the battery energy storage system, and the existing diesel power plant. This combination can make the renewable power plant become more reliable, increase fuel efficiency, fewer emission, and also reduce cost of energy. One more important part, the energy management system will monitor, control, and optimize the overall system according to customer needs and the solar power fluctuation. Therefore, we can propose that smart microgrid are properly addressed for the future of sustainable power. Finally, I would like to thank to the Indonesian Electrical Society, Masyarakat Kelistrikan Indonesia, MKI, for taking initiative of this event, which is a forum that accommodates companies with governmental organization, practitioners, observers, students, and communities to share the latest advancement and benefit of the smart microgrid to drive a transition toward a carbon neutral, and how Indonesia played a role in this sector. Thank you. Billahi taufiq walhidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam. Om Santi 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 Om. Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan.
Ya, Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Syamsul Huda, for the inspiring speech on smart microgrid development in 3T areas, or terluar, terdepan, and tertinggal in Indonesian language. As delivered by Pak Huda, PLN shows the initiative to reduce the carbon to become zero carbon at 2060, and also they already built some development for microgrids in these three areas. It's very nice. So since here Mr. Edwin Diender from Huawei is also already joined, I would like to invite for one more time for photo session for all of the speakers. So I would like to invite all of the speakers to switch on your camera So I will count down for the taking the picture. Okay, are you ready? Okay, I will count down. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much for all of the speakers. So we already have the very nice photo session. So let's move to our next agenda, which is a presentation from Mr. Edwin Diender from Huawei. And again, as a reminder, the attendees have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into Q&A box on Zoom or via live chat on YouTube at any time during the presentation. Please mention your name and your organization and to whom the questions are posted. We will then collect the questions and address them during our Q&A sessions. So, but before the presentation begins, allow us to read a brief biography of Mr. Edwin Diender from Huawei Technology Co. Limited. So, Mr. Diender is considered a blue ocean strategist for Huawei Enterprise and frequent speaker at events around the world, adept on a range of subjects from big data to safe and smart cities to enterprise solutions. Not a salesman, not a technologist. He is a tech strategist, accustomed to larger concepts. He has been globally involved in several programs and initiatives, scaling from small up to medium and large rollouts across the industry value chain. As Chief Innovation Officer, he helps customers and partners with their digital journey. He is the go-to person for innovation, digital twins, business, and growth. He will focus on smart city or safe city economics, digital governance and cloud, the future of work, big data analytics. As digital practice leader, he will drive energy transition as the next wave of innovation for digital transformation, leveraging the universal framework for smart city construction and the hierarchy of needs for connectivities and industry. Okay, without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Edwin Diender to deliver his presentation on microgrid to power a greener future. So please, Mr. Edwin, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pradita, and thank you everyone for joining. And thank you also everyone for allowing me to share with you some ideas about where we are as a company when we look at a greener future, zero and carbon neutrality, and the power, the maximum power, if you don't mind me saying so, of the microgrid. I'm Chief Innovation Officer in our Global Energy Business Unit, and my name is Edwin Diender. I started working for Huawei at the end of 2011, by the way, so I have a bit of a history. And I am based out of Shenzhen, which is off the coast of Hong Kong, which is almost in our Asia Pacific region. I'd like to talk about how and where green power for all is driving a greener future for all. We do not necessarily only talk about specific sites or specific dealing rooms or data centers. What we specifically want to talk about is how areas and offices and homes are subject to that. So where and how is green power available for all of us? Well, solar does it already very well, and Huawei is leading in that domain already. If we look at the domain of energy, and if we look at how and where we are embarking on where it's being generated, then it's being distributed and stored, and then where it's being used. This is an overview of how Huawei already has a global footprint when it comes to the digital transformation of the industry in general and specific parts of the industry in specific, looking at how digital is able to allow energy generation, for example, to already be generated better than it already does. Technology should, of course, allow us to do better what we already do best, but technology should also allow us to be more optimized in the way how we do that. So from energy storage system to power generation to power distribution and to intelligent scheduling and management of all these infrastructures. That brings us to a very specific domain that we think relates the strongest to and the most maximized way for power grids, in this case, micro power grids, that sits with commercial areas and households, buildings, homes. It is not for nothing that the mission statement of Huawei says that we want to bring digital to every person, home, and organization for a fully intelligent, but I would also like to say a greener and carbon neutral world. 30% more raising of power generation provided in an ultimate security set and enables a zero carbon footprint. That is where the power of a microgrid also comes in and leads to. And last but not least, we also think that it should be done and it should be available in the safest way possible. From our global solution sales practice and from our global footprint, we have aggregated and collected a tremendous amount, not only of experience, but specifically of experience in how to bring this to specific regions, to specific areas, and how and where and in what way to integrate and let these areas work together as one. For example, Indonesia with close to or even more than thousands of islands where specific communities are. The power of digital combined with the power of a greener energy source, a smart or a microgrid, if you like, is exactly that. And it's safe. So where does the power of a microgrid sit? It sits in this particular picture. You see different scenarios on the right-hand side being highlighted by features and functionalities and value on the left-hand side. Remote areas, rural areas, a combination of islands and so on and so forth, very autonomous, but also at the verge of being unlocked when it comes to the potential of green, when it comes to the potential of carbon neutral, and when it comes to the potential of new and renewable energy. Solar parks, for example, very dedicated to create a renewable energy source for islands and rural areas with a very dedicated, high, safe and secure shelter for the housing and storage of the equipment. And from there, it transmits, it stores, but it also distributes the different powers to the different units and the different needs. Hospitals, for example, or educational campuses, government services, and what have you. Everything and anything connected unlocks the potential as the power of the microgrid. If we look a bit into details of this, it has to start with the inverter. This is where solar and high density light is being converted into a platform that starts with the inversion, the microgrid inverter in this particular case. It already has, in the shape and size, as you see here, a capacity of 165 kilowatts already. It is very modular. It doesn't need to be closed off if it needs to be upgraded or migrated or if it needs to be expanded. The units inside are very hot swappable. So the more energy we need, the easier it is to expand on that and to grow from there. It also has different features built in. For example, if batteries are heating too much or if batteries are at the verge of, in their life cycle, needing to be replaced. Also then, it's a lot of information that goes into an intelligent operations center, more or less a feature that functions as a brain and a nervous system, if you like, to be further efficient in daily operations from the inverter side of the equation. From there, it goes to, from energy generation to energy storage and energy distribution. The combination of these two do not necessarily have to be within 1, 2, or 5 meters of each other. As long as they are connected, we can store energy anywhere, and we can also unlock and reach that energy and distribute it from there. We can also load balance that energy. So a solar plant that has a long lifespan can also be supported with the storage of energy and the distribution of energy. And our innovation and research and development power, Huawei is one of the few organizations worldwide that truly champions in innovation, is a special design battery, and not so much a special design battery for these purposes, but a special design battery for the purpose of a microgrid to support rural areas and, for example, islands and communities on those islands. And on top of this, of course, sits a mechanism that helps homeowners, high-tech park managerial teams and operation and maintenance teams and so on and so forth to also be very efficient in the way they manage, in the way they monitor, and in the way they maintain, and in the way they upgrade and migrate their infrastructures and their services. For example, by mobile applications. that log on to cloud-enabled services that are available at the touch of a fingertip on smartphones for app integration and what have you, in real time. Because one of the true things in digital transformation is that energy and energy transition is the power of the digital journey. If there is no power, truly, there is no digital journey. And that brings me to the end of what I'd had to share with you before we can go into a Q&A, of course. We truly believe that the power of digital is only supported if we maximize on the digital transformation within grids, specifically when it comes to rural areas, smaller sized communities, island communities, and what have you. And we have a strong footprint already for this, also when it comes to cases and experience sharing. Microgrid is truly an enabler to power a greener and carbon neutral future. And this is what I had to share in this short time frame with you. Thank you very much. I hope I stayed in the time that I was granted.
Thank you, Mr. Edwin. It's pretty nice in time also. And it is an interesting topic for sure, how the microgrid could bring a greener future for us by enabling zero. Know that innovation from Huawei, which is support for the development and the implementation of this smart grid. So thank you for your presentation, Mr. Edwin. So for the Q&A session, we will have after the next presentation. For sure, before we move to our next agenda, which is a presentation from Mrs. Architrandi, there will be a poll for the attendance. So the poll will be posted, and please fill in the poll. Okay. How about the poll? Is it okay? Meanwhile, we will waiting to prepare for the next presentation also.
I think the microphone is unmuted. That's why we cannot hear.
Okay. Now the polling is already open. So please feel free for submit the polling. So thank you for your participation. Back to the presentation, allow us to read a brief biography of Bu Chitra for first. Bu Chitra has 17-year experience in the clean energy sector, particularly in power sector. Her competencies of cover team leadership and management of complex clean energy and climate change mitigation projects and program in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, of course. Bu Chitra has in-depth knowledge and has hands-on experience, for example, policy and regulatory framework and climate change aspect, including GHG accounting and carbon emission inventory. She has recently joined Asian Development Bank, or called ADB, in June 2021 as Senior Energy Specialist in the Southeast Asia Department. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Bu Chitra to deliver a presentation on financial support for smart microgrid. So please, Bu Chitra, the Zoom is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pradita, and good afternoon, evening, morning, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. Even though the topic is on microgrid, however, since I'm currently speaking on behalf of Asian Development Bank, who's financing activities related to distribution and transmission. And I would like to share in this event what are the programs that we are financing and the challenges in the electrical grid strengthening in Indonesia. So in our support for the electrical grid strengthening, our lending pipeline Indonesia for 2021 to 2023 covered around $3 billion in financing, which covers the sustainable and inclusive energy sector in Indonesia, and it also covers both transmission and distribution, renewables. There are some knowledge support in the carbon capture storage, but very limited only for the industrial appliances and also energy efficiency. So in our approach to provide the support, we provide this analytic and awareness of the condition and environment in the country itself. We try to provide support that mainstream the energy security, energy access, and also to respond to the clean energy requirement and considerations, so that our aim these days is to finance the clean energy and sustainable infrastructure. For your information, the support on the electricity grid strengthening that we provided as of until 2021, we had this what we call result-based lending program that aimed and supporting the increase of access of reliability electricity network that covers Sumatra. This is the first ever result-based lending program in the energy sector in any country. It also covers the upgrading of existing substations and also reconductoring of existing transmission lines. This program largely also support the new mid-voltage and low-voltage distribution lines. This program continued to extend in the what we call EGDP that covers Sulawesi and Nusa Tenggara. This covered the strengthening and expanding the distribution system in Nusa Tenggara and Sulawesi, which also covers the smart grid financing of smart grid pilots to help improve power quality, increase use of renewable energy, and also a feeder line interruption to reduce the feeder line interruption. And then that was the second RBL, and then the third RBL program is the Electricity Grid Development Program Phase 2, EGDP2, which support the strengthening and expansion of the distribution system in Kalimantan, Maluku, and Papua. And the fifth RBL, the fifth RBL program that we are going to have, the fourth RBL program that we are going to process, we are currently processing, and hopefully it could be launched next year, hopefully, is the transmission and distribution strengthening in Central Java area. So for your information, in this result-based lending, this is different to a conventional lending, where the financing in this result-based lending is paid against a results and an outcome, instead of an expenditures of construction of the facility itself. So this is the coverage of the RBL in the Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Nusa Tenggara, Maluku, and Papua. Those are the result-based lending that is completed. Like in Sumatra, it is completed. In Sulawesi and Nusa Tenggara, it's expected to be completed by this year, early next year, and then in Papua, Kalimantan, and Maluku is an ongoing program. Another financing that ADB implemented for grid strengthening is in the transmission area. For example, in the West Kalimantan Power Grid Strengthening, it's approved in 2013. And then also the Jawa-Bali 500 kilovolt power transmission crossing, which is also approved in 2013. However, there are many like components cancelled because of the land permit. So this is the issue of the transmission financing, that, and then also construction, that if we would like to see the needs and the challenge of the financing of the transmission, is that we see that if the planning is not done well, public or private projects can lock in long-term financial obligations of underused assets. Particularly in the financing of the transmission system, we face the challenge in the safeguard, particularly like in the land acquisitions, in the land permit. It's not that the securing land and the forestry permits and then land rights for the transmission a kind of a challenge. And there's also like a political challenge. We need to also consider local content requirement, which is not always easy. In one of our power generation financing project, our loan is also canceled because of this local content requirement. And then I think I'll just there's two options for financings in the transmission transmission sectors: a conventional procurement versus the public private partnerships. However, there are certain recommendation and certain findings of pro and con between the conventionals and the PPP. We see that the state budget infusion is the cheapest option for PLN to fund the new transmission. The multilateral funding also is more expensive, but also cheaper than corporate loans. There's an opportunity to adopt PPP. It could be a better value. However, the cost will depend on the risk and the PLN's ability to increase revenue from the new transmission lines. And then there's also lack of evidence base for the PPP, as a no value for money studies have been conducted for this transmission. Therefore, there's need to conduct a value for money analysis for high priority projects before deciding on the financing route for the transmission project. So towards the end of the presentation, we would like to emphasize that for the microgrid and for the smart grid avenue, our effort right now is more towards result-based lending compared to the conventional financing. So I think by this end of the findings and the summary financing of the transmission slide, I end my presentation. This one, I end my presentation, and thank you for your time and also attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bu Chitra, for the interesting presentation. So we already know some financing plan, for example, from IDB, how to financing our smart grid, smart microgrid project. Okay. So before we go on to the before we go to our first Q&A session, please fill in the survey. So, which is the most interesting topic for you? Okay, that's enough, I think. Thank you for fill the poll. So now is the time for the first Q&A session. We are now going to take questions from Q&A box on Zoom and live chat on YouTube. So let's invite Mr. Edwin and Bu Chitra to switch on the camera. I think it's already switched on. And as a reminder, the webinar participant can still submit questions through the Q&A box on Zoom and also live chat on YouTube.
To the questions, thank you.
Okay, please wait, I will collect the questions.
And by the way, compliments on a well-organized webinar.
Okay, so first questions is for Mr. Diender from Huawei. There are talk about the storage equipments at the end of lifetime as a waste. If we reduce CO2 and be happy to drive green energy, we should not forget about getting rid of the waste. This means from the battery. Otherwise, we replace pollution by another problem. What is your comment on that?
I've lost your connection. I've got it.
Okay, or may I repeat the questions, I think?
Yeah, if you can repeat the first one, and then I will answer, and then if you can repeat the second one, I will answer the second one.
Okay.
It's something
So
about
there
carbon
are
footprint.
About the storage equipments, for example, batteries at the end of lifetime as a waste. So if we want to reduce the carbon dioxide and be happy to drive green energy, we should not forget about getting rid of the waste. Otherwise, we replace a pollution by another problem. What is your comment on that?
Oh, I could not agree more. That is very, very true. That is very correct. And in return, we have taken this into account. Our production process, for example, is making use of recyclable parts. The principle of circular economy and producing and production from cradle to grave, for example, are very high up in the way we produce circular economic battery packs. The idea and the principle indeed for Huawei is to create an end-to-end, very holistic solution stack, if you like, and portfolio. So long story short, yes, could not agree more. It has to be as green as possible, and it also has to be part of a circular economy and using recyclable materials and so on. Fully true.
Okay, for sure. Maybe we can move to the next questions. This is from Dave from Bandung. I want to ask regarding the inverter. You show us in the presentation, each cabinet is maximum at 165 kilowatt. But we can add another cabinets. How many we can parallel the inverter? Is there any maximum parallel units? Okay, thank you.
I don't have the exact answer as to the maximum, but we have deployments worldwide that are beyond the megawatts, so to speak, and the gigawatts. So yes, it is very stackable, it's very modular, and it's very easy to expand. It's also easy to circle back a bit if we need to downscale, or if we need to create two locations that work together as one, almost like mirrored. So yes, very stackable, very easy to expand, but for the maximum, I don't have the exact and correct answer at this time, at this point. I did a minute ago, as I was speaking, sending a message to one of my team members to see if we can already get the answer of the exact details right now, but if not, we would have to give you that answer offline.
Okay, thank you. So maybe for further information, maybe Mr. Dave can contact to Huawei.
Definitely, yes, definitely.
Okay. Maybe we will move to the next question. It's asked to Bu Chitra. So in your support for transmission and distribution, do you discussing the program of improving and optimizing power transformer as a main object in transmission and distribution system? This is the questions, Bu Chitra.
In fact, it's not the main object, but it's one of the key objects in the program itself. So to improve reliability is not only to improve the system itself, but also to look at what gives the challenges and what is the main cost of the interruptions of the network. But in the program itself, we also provide, like the financing also covers the upgrading and then the installations of transformers for the distribution system.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Chitra. There is another questions for
Recording in progress.
The question is, the electrical infrastructure is one of the most complex infrastructure made by private sector and supervised by government. With the green agenda for its industry, how sure the poor people would not affected by the rise of electricity bill? What do you comment?
Okay, for this one, during including the green agenda, another one thing that needs to be included is the inclusivity, which also include this underprivileged community. Therefore, in preparing the program, we're not only thinking about the levels of like different, like for example, right now we know that government still have a subsidy for the poor people, right? By demonstrating their kartu miskin, which is I think we in under like 900 in the tariff of 900 VA, there's still like some subsidy. But another points that we need to see is that when we include the green agenda, we also think about how to develop a productive use of this clean energy to also support and improve the economic conditions of the poor and underprivileged people. So instead of think about only how it's not giving a burden, but also try to provide, develop like solutions of how this green energy can also include and improve the life of this underprivileged people, underprivileged community by developing and designing a productive use of energy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will move to the next questions. It is from me actually. I want to ask Mr. Edwin before we will wait for another question from the participant. So, what is the strategies to implement the smart microgrid Indonesia? What do you think?
What the strategy would be?
Yeah.
Well,
Because
I think very pragmatic. Sure. Very pragmatic, I would say. I think it takes a couple of discussions with multiple stakeholders to come to a mutual understanding. This mutual understanding usually converts very easy into a document where the M of mutual maybe can change into a memorandum of understanding. And by signing off that memorandum of understanding, I would say we have a piece of paper that has a very clear direction as to where we want to go, when we want to start, and who we want to start with. So my suggestion for a strategy would be to be very pragmatic in this case. Let's sit down, let's come to a mutual agreement, and let's move forward together hand in hand, shoulder by shoulder, so to speak.
Okay, thank you for your comments. And for Bu Chitra, there is another question for the financing for the smart microgrid. As you mentioned, for currently there is some plan for financing is the result-based funding, if I'm not mistaken. So could you explain more about this related to the smart microgrid project?
For your information, Pradita, as I mentioned to you, we don't have a specific financing for smart microgrid project. What we already progressed, what we had during the financing of ADB for the RBL and SNT, we include pilot smart grid of PLN in Sulawesi and Nusa Tenggara of 4 pilot smart grid projects as an indicators of the financing result based in Sulawesi and Nusa Tenggara. So it's not a smart microgrid, but it's a pilot smart grid projects. And when you think about result-based lending, it's different from conventional financing. Yeah, in conventional financing, you reimburse the finance against expenditures, but in the result-based lending, you disburse the financing against what is indicator that has been agreed in the outset of the agreement, of the loan agreement.
Okay, thank you. It's very clear for the explanation, Bu Citra. So let's move to the next question. It's a question from Pak Rinaldo. He is a lecturer from Unica de la Salle, Manado. So my question is in line with the emphasis of Mr. Edwin, underline on the ultimate security on the smart grid systems. As new threats emerge along, how are the security risks managed in the PLN system? And are there security policies, certificate, for example, and also on security issues? Maybe this can be answered by Bu Citra.
Sure. Would you like me to answer first?
Yeah. Sure.
So if you look at the technology build of our solution stack, then end to end, so throughout the value chain of that solution stack, the principle of safe and secure have been embedded not only from a thinking and a design point of view, but also from a production, from an implementation, from a delivery, and from an operations and maintenance point of view. On top of that sits the mechanism of policies, regulations, and legislations. Also, these are embedded in our platforms when it comes to a specific application or implementation or digital integration that follows these policies and these legislations, if you like. And last but not least, from a real electricity technology point of view, things like having a very strong solution stack that creates a safer and secure environment from the engineering point of view and maintenance point of view. What we mean by that is the inspections, so to speak. There are many digital technologies that allow us to inspect in a much safer way than before, and that is, of course, reducing the risk of people getting hurt. It reduces the insurance that sometimes an organization need to put in place as a life insurance, for example, sometimes on maintenance engineer, versus the higher value of those inspections, because those inspections from a digital point of view become more accurate and become more precise. And last but not least, if we look at string energy and these kind of things, we have introduced the first smart string energy storage system to further reduce the risk and maximize the security and safety procedures around it.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Edwin. So maybe Bu Citra can relate to the finance program on security issue. Is it possible for this financing?
It's not only possible, in fact, basically like in the result-based program, in one of the indicators, for example, in one of the result-based lending that is currently going on, is also an indicator of trained people in the community who is trained on the safety and operation and maintenance of the clean energy system, which is developed for that in that RBL program. So it's not a question, but it's already like it's security is already like a factor that needs to be already like included in all the design, in the program design and financing program. for the increasing access in electricity.
Okay, thank you, Bu Chitra. So this security issue is also one of the factors for the result base, right?
It's not the factor, but factors that needs to be already considered when we design the program.
Okay, I see. Thank you for your answer. So there is next question. This is from Bu Intan, maybe, or Intan from PLN. This question for Mr. Edwin Diender. Could you please explain how Huawei maintain the after sales of the smart microgrid and make sure that it is very simple to use? Okay, thank you.
Well, that sits with training and certification, of course, not only on the engineering, on the commissioning and installations side of the equation, but also in our partner ecosystem where integrators, operators, and all the shackles in the value chain in the middle, of course, have to work together. And last but not least, of course, it sits with very intuitive applications and explanations and clarifications towards, for example, a homeowner who has maybe a couple of solar panels mounted on the roof, and that needs to learn how to work with the application that runs on the phone or another smart device, and how from that application the homeowner can access the technological but also the energy generation details of each individual solar panel, combined with the inverters and maybe even the storage, the energy storage components in terms of uptime, how much has it been generated, how low have I been this week on my global carbon footprint, to create more awareness, to be more energy aware and energy efficient, for example. Training, certification, a lot of thought leadership, and a lot of awareness creation is how we would do this. For our partner ecosystem, we strongly believe that this road to digital transformation, so to speak, is not a road of one organization and many people in one organization. There's a famous proverb that says, if you want to go far, you go by yourself. If you want to go fast, you go by yourself. But if you want to go far, you go together. We strongly believe that a strong ecosystem with different partners combined would be able to create an opportunity for us to lower the carbon footprint, create a greener environment, but most importantly, create a stronger ecosystem of all of us together. Because if we don't do this all together, we don't end up where we need to be. We only reach halfway, so to speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edwin. And yeah, I note one sentences that I like from your answer. It's very nice. Okay, maybe we can go for the next questions. As reminder, you can write your questions in the Q&A box, and also if you in the live YouTube, you also can put your question in the live chat. So the next questions is for Bu Chitra. It's about still the result based lending. Could you explain more about the detail of what kind of the factors that should be considered for the result based lending program for funding?
For your information, this result, since I work on the sovereign financing, so our loan is not for a private sectors. This is dedicated for the financing for the one that I explained to you is related to the program that we finance for PLN. And the main objective in the I think like three result-based lending that we have already conducted and implemented are to increase the access to sustainable and clean energy. So it's mainly to improve and provide increasing distribution access. It also covers the upgrading and installations of transformer, like distribution transformer, And then in the last result-based lending, like in Kalimantan, Papua, and Maluku, it also facilitates the access to clean energy generation by small-scale renewable energy that is developed or transferred from, for example, local government to PLN. However, this is still ongoing.
Okay,
So because your question
for your answer,
previously,
yes.
Yeah, because previously the question is too wide. So I just to have to narrow it down. It's only for the increased access to electricity, and it only covers distribution system. Even for the transmission, it only covers, like in Sumatra, it only covers reconductoring.
Okay, so actually it will be a very specific project.
It's not project. It's not project,
okay.
It's a program.
Very well said.
Okay, because it's not a program, so it's more like programmatics. It's not a project, a specific project. The program can covers like several projects, several activities, but the financing is paid against indicators and result frameworks of a program. It's not a project based. So the program is owned by the government, by PLN, and ADB, for example, we only finance a part of the program. So the total program is like, for example, I think in Sumatra, for example, the total program is 1.4 billion. 600 million is financed by the ADBs, 500 million is financed by the World Bank, and the rest is by a PLN, also like the source of funding, PLN source of funding. So that's the difference between a project-based, a conventional financing, and a result-based program.
Okay, thank you. It should be clear now. Okay, we have another questions. From the smart grid application point of view, what is your preference for Indonesia? A fully integrated power national power grid or distributed power grid, or a combination of the integrated grid along big island and isolated grid in small island? I think it will be the last question for this session.
Well, I think there's another famous saying that says, in each question is the answer already. And I think in this particular question, there are a couple of answers. And I think all of them can apply depending on how, what I said earlier, a group of brains at a round table coming together and create a mutual understanding, because whatever comes out of that mutual understanding should be and is, of course, the best way forward for Indonesia. I think it is a combination of the items that already have been summed up in the question itself, because Indonesia is, of course, a nation of many different faces, and each face has a specific way of dealing with it. Also, when it comes to power distribution, and power integration, for example, it's not easy to make one power grid that is linking all the islands, for example, but it is very easy to provide each island with their unique power generation source. The management of that, the overall and the overarching or overlaying management could be somewhere centralized, and that overlooks and overlays and overarches a distributed architecture that at some points has maybe a disconnect, as I said, because each island for themselves and the island communities can have their own power generation or their own solar park or their own power source, for example. But that's the nature of the geography of the nation of Indonesia in this particular case. But as I said, in the question is the answer.
Okay, thank you. So maybe this can be the last question for the first Q&A session. So thank you for Mr. Edwin Diender and also Bu Citra for your nice comments and answer for our session. So Now we will have a break about 5 minutes. So for the attendance, you can enjoy our sponsor videos. I will be back immediately afterwards. Thank you.
Tide strongly believes the importance of environment protection and energy efficiency in order to achieve a sustainable future for mankind. Thus, our technological commitment will foster mutual betterment of our allied companies, customers, shareholders, and employees. Tide pledges to always hold their management philosophy and values at heart. Until now, the meter readers have had to do manual meter reading. This existing manual process is time and money consuming work. This makes it hard for us to detect blackout and manage energy demands. And it makes us hard to manage loss during transmission and distribution. As a result, this existing manual process makes grid unsmarter. But Tide's end-to-end AMI solutions will connect the user with utility companies. Tide's intelligent AMI solutions will solve many problems from the existing manual process. We can reduce time and money spent metering manually. We can manage blackout and loss during distribution. We can do demand response, TOU. Finally, we can make grid smarter. AMI service. Meter reading information of household is call-cited by modem and DCU. There are two types of smart meter, internal and external. Smart meter sends metering data to modem via serial communication. Modem sends metering data to DCU via PLC communication. DCU sends metering data to server via fiber optic and cellular network. On-time monitoring and detection of electrical loss. TOU, time of USC flexible tariffs. Connectivity to electric vehicle charging system. Connection of renewable energy and battery with bidirectional metering. Reliable collection rate improving monitoring of power quality. Making grid smarter and more efficient. A hidden champion in the energy IoT solution industry. Tide.
Welcome back to our webinar entitled Smart Microgrids, the Future of Sustainable Power. And again, as a reminder, the attendants have the opportunity to submit the text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into Q&A box on the Zoom or via live chat on the YouTube at any time during the presentation. Please mention your name and your organization and to whom the questions are posted. We will then collect the questions and address them during our Q&A session. So let's move to our next agenda, which is a presentation from Mr. Muhammad Marwali from New York ISO on smart microgrids, the future of sustainable power. But before the presentation begins, allow us to read a brief biography of Mr. Muhammad Marwali. Dr. Marwali's experience has been in various power applications of the regulated electricity market. He is currently the Energy Market Engineering Manager at the New York ISO, and he is responsible to provide engineering support to the day-ahead and real-time energy markets to ensure the application software is functional to operate New York ISO markets in line with the rules and reliability criteria. He was responsible for long-term market vision, strategy, and technical direction, while coordinating with the product plans to ensure consistency. He led the development and evolution of the New York ISO's market technology solution, as well as preliminary and feasibility simulation studies for future market products. Mr. Marwali has published numerous articles and books, and he is a senior member of IEEE, where he served on several editorial boards. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Marwali to deliver the presentation. So, please, Mr. Marwali, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Mrs. Pradita, Hadi. Today, I will present in this webinar topic in a smart grid application in US and specifically in the New York State. The first thing that I hope that something that from this webinar you can learn a little bit our experience, and hopefully you can adopt it for the implementation in Indonesia. Let me start this presentation from the definition of microgrid in US. Why I call it different definition in US and maybe different definition in Europe, maybe different definition in Indonesia. In US, kind of give you a little bit background, is the electricity in, I mean, mostly of 100% of population in US already has access to electricity. So the microgrid definition here is basically a system that has a collection of load and generation that are connected to the grid or macrogrid. So microgrid and macrogrid typically are connected. The only difference is basically that it has a control that enable this microgrid to operate independently or in island mode, they call it. I'm pretty sure in other area of the world, the microgrid is mostly are independent from the macrogrid, right? But in US, because everybody have access to the electricity, so most of the purpose of the microgrid is slightly different from with other application in the rest of the world, basically. So let me go to the component of microgrid. Again, in US, we can group them into a group of load, basically, which is connected to the distribution generation, which is basically local generation, and also is managing by a control or energy management system, basically. And in some cases, there are also energy storage involved, basically, in this microgrid. And as always, they are always connected also to macrogrid, in this case, like utility, or in Indonesia, maybe PLN or PLN. So it has the ability to operate in synchronize with the utility, and it has the ability to operate by itself, basically. So the question is now, in US, why you need microgrid? If everybody have access to the utility, why? What is the benefit of that microgrid? So here I will tell you what is the benefit from a US perspective, why we use microgrid even though everybody have access to electricity. And electricity is quite reliable, although in some area they are not really reliable, but almost 90%. I mean, very rare we have load shedding. I mean, so most of the time the load is there, and I mean the power is always there, and everybody have access. So now here, let's go to the benefit. The benefit of the microgrid is basically to reduce the cost, especially during the time where the load at the peak hours. During the peak hours, the cost of electricity in US is, let me get back a little bit. In US, the electricity is mostly a market oriented, like any other commodity. We use spot price. So the price is changing basically all the time. And during the peak hour, the price is quite expensive because the utility need to utilize or to use a generator that have higher fuel costs. So having microgrid in here can help and reduce the cost, because microgrid can contribute and supplying the load during the period when the load is quite high. The other advantage if you use microgrid is the ability to integrate the renewable energy. As you know, the renewable energy are is very easily, built close to the customer. While if you want to build power plant, like nuclear power plant, you may want to build it far away from the residential or business. While microgrid, you can build it right there where the load sits, basically. So that's another advantage. These microgrid give a lot of incentive for renewable energy to penetrate the market now, or participate in the power system market. The other advantage is resiliency. Resiliency. This is what happened in New York a few years back when we have a storm. We call it a particular huge storm, what we call it Sandy, we'll call it, what is it, we call it, Hurricane Sandy. When they're coming and hit New York, it's a lot of places where all the transmission line shut down and then broken. And then the advantage of microgrid that people start realizing that time is the ability to operate independently when they are disconnected from the grid. And the area in Long Island where we have a microgrid, it survived basically through that blackout during the storm. So people start realizing in here, resiliency is another advantage of microgrid, the ability to operate when there is a big emergency in the power system. And the last thing that we can see the benefit of this microgrid is basically the ability to improve the optimization of transmission and distribution. Why did I say that? The reason I say that, because of the utility could avoid basically the cost of building a new substation. Let's assume the load is grown. If the load is grow grow and grow and grow, utility has to build or expand the existing substation. And if you have a microgrid, this can be avoided by using microgrid for supplying the load for few hours in a year, basically, right? Because the growth is not going to be suddenly increasing and become economic to build a $1 million substation, for example, right? So in the beginning, it's kind of very good source of energy while we are looking at the growth of the load at certain point until there is economically viable to build the substation. So here we can see that microgrids start helping the utility to avoid investment costs on building a substation, for example. And the other thing is, it also reduces the transmission, the need of transmission, because you have to build power plant that is very far away because of nuclear power plant, usually hundreds of miles from the load center. Now with microgrid, you build it, the renewable energy or the type of generator that's available over in microgrid is really usually very environmentally friendly, basically. So then it right there, you don't need transmission line also. So that's another advantage for the microgrid. So let's go to the next one here. We want to see the benefit of microgrid. In the end, what is the other benefit of microgrid is sometimes, even though they give benefit, the benefit is not really necessarily going to the microgrid owner. What happens is sometimes the benefit, like in this slide, you can see that the benefit is going, some of them go to utility, which is the microgrid, and the society. The microgrid owner sometimes get still less than cost of investment. So this is not good. Then in this case, in US, what we do here is basically we try to subsidize, basically. Utility, because they get the benefit of microgrid, they participate in subsidizing the microgrid owner, basically. So, and also not only the utility, and sometimes the county or the government, basically local government, is also subsidizing the microgrid owner, because the benefit of environment, for example, now you have less emission because you can have less transmission line, right? So they give in or chip in into subsidizing the microgrid owner, so that in the end, in the long run, microgrid owner will have incentive or thinking that, hey, all my investment is gonna get paid back, basically. So there's also something that need to be think about something that we need to be think when you are starting to put the policy or a payment for the microgrid owner. I mean, in the long run. I mean, that's the only way to speed up the growth of microgrid. So the next slide here is basically, I will explain is about the assessment, or what should we do when you plan to build a microgrid system, basically. This is the step that we do basically we call it into 3-step process or workflow that start from the microgrid characterization. Basically, we try to identify, to characterize what is the type of microgrid by identifying the location, do site visit, and then look at the location and see what is the measure of the characteristic of the location. And then you have to look at the load pattern. Is that a load, is the peak load is in the morning, or the peak load in the afternoon, or the peak load during the evening? So that pattern needs to be understood. And also we need to look into what are the existing generation that already exist in the system, basically. And then try to evaluate what type of control that's available already over there. So that's something that also need to be looked on. Then I just want to go very quickly, basically, that you can see this is the type of microgrid that is different. This is the technology that we are implementing in US. There are some of them, we can group them into renewable and non-renewable, basically we call like combined cycle, and then diesel, fuel cell, which is non-renewable, and then we have wind, which is very popular here, and solar, and especially those are the things that is popular in microgrid, basically. Now let's see about the microgrid reference architecture. This is basically a reference that we use basically in building the microgrid system. As you see here, is the first step that you have to do is basically try to identify the load, basically, right, and group them into one is critical load, we call it, and the other one we call it discretionary load, basically, which is basically typical load. Critical load is the load that for sure, like hospital or a police station, airport, or something that is critical, or while the like a residential or less critical customer, we call it discretionary load. And then the other load is basically the load that you think that if there is emergency or we have to disconnect from the microgrid or the utility, you can shut it off, those loads. So after we group them, the other thing that we have to do is to build the control system here, basically. The control system here is basically to make sure, look at this line, the blue line here. The blue line is the control system. And the other thing that we have to consider is the telemetry, the data. The data need to be also sent to the control, basically. So microgrid controller is very important. Microgrid controller is the place where it will get the sensor of metering from the load and from the distributed generator inside the microgrid and try to control it and to ensure that the load and the generation are balanced all the time, and to make sure when we want to connect back to the utility, it can be synchronized accordingly, and then without any disturbance, basically. So those are the things that use as a reference, basically, right? First, you make sure that there is a controller, you have a telemetry, you make sure that you organize your load accordingly, whether it's critical, discretionary, and the load that you can set in, whenever there is a emergency. So this is a case. Just I would like to give you in that we have built in Suffolk County in Long Island, basically. In the beginning, if you see that on the left side here, you can see that we already have existing system which is connected to the utility, and you can see here the green box here. This is the border, basically, with the of the microgrid. So what happened is, the minute there is something happen, you want to isolate, this green switch will be open, basically. So this try to disconnect it to the microgrid, basically. So that's the new thing that we built. And then after that, on the right hand side, you can see over there, we also built the controller and also the metering, basically. And then the thing is in here, that, like I said, this is proven that during the Hurricane Sandy a couple of years back, I mean, it's really can operate independently when the rest of the New York State has a blackout and load shedding and rolling blackout, and Suffolk County does not have that problem because they are more resilient, basically, to this disturbance, basically. So all in all, basically, the future of this microgrid is really changing the future of power system. And just keep in mind, microgrid does not just belong to developing countries, but country like US that has 100% population have access to power system also need microgrid, basically, because the resiliency, renewable energy, emission reduction, and reduction of losses. And the thing that changing is mean that in the future, power system is no longer like generation, transmission, and distribution anymore. Generation, transmission, and distribution now is collapsing now to become one. As like you see on the right hand side here, where the supply now is very close to the load. That's what the trend of the future of power system. No longer you're gonna see like 500 kV line or 750 kV line to support the whole power system, but more really self-independent or more like resilient and more be able to operate in the isolation mode even. So I guess that concludes my presentation here, and then I will give it back to this is moderator, and then you can talk later with during the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marwali, for the interesting presentation. You mentioned about the benefits of a microgrid, including the energy cost reduction, sustainability, resiliency, and network optimization. And also, you explained about the microgrid assessment and the task workflow. It's very well explained. You also described the reference architecture for the microgrid that consists not only power equipment, for sure, but also the control equipment, which is one of the important part of the smart microgrid. Finally, you also explained the case of microgrid in the New York ISO. So again, as a reminder, the attendants have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your question into Q&A box on Zoom or via live chat on YouTube at any time during the presentation. So please mention your name and your organization and to whom the questions are posted. We will collect the questions and address them during the Q&A session. Also, there will be a present form posted on chat room in Zoom and live chat in YouTube. Please fill in. You will receive an e-certificate for this webinar participation via email within 7 working days at the latest. And also the webinar presentation materials will be sent to your email, which is registered in this form. So let's move to our next agenda, which is a presentation from Pak Fajar from Syntek Energy and Control with entitled Planning and Implementation Grid Interactive Hybrid PV, Battery and Diesel. So before the presentation begin, allow us to read a brief biography of Pak Fajar. So Mr. Fajar Sastrowijoyo is a renewable energy practitioner in Indonesia, especially in solar photovoltaic, battery storage, microgrid, and industrial automation. He finished his bachelor education in Bandung Institute of Technology in electrical engineering and his master education in South Korea in power electronics. He previously worked as a researcher in Singapore and Korea in the fields of automation and power electronics. He co-founded Syntek Energy and Control, an end-to-end renewable energy service provider. He is experienced in planning, developing, constructing, managing, and servicing more than 50 large-scale renewable energy projects in Indonesia, including several of the megawatt-sized PV and also the largest solar PV plant in Indonesia. His current focus is on large-scale hybrid PV integration and hybrid microgrid system. His passion and dream is to encourage and accelerate remote and rural electrification using affordable green energy. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Pak Fajar Sastrowijoyo to deliver a presentation on planning and implementation grid interactive hybrid PV battery diesel. So, Pak Fajar, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Bu Pradita. Can you see my screen already?
Yes, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the time. My name is Fajar. This time I will present a little different presentation from the previous presenters, where we will move to the more practical and technical side, which is based on our experience in implementing most of PLN's microgrids until now. So this is a little bit of biography from our side. I am now in Syntek Energy and Control. We are a system integrator focusing on power electronics, grid automations, and most importantly, hybrid PV and microgrid. And these are the microgrid projects that we have did previously. So we did microgrids since 2015 in Sumba, and then we continue in Derawan in 2018, which is the first PLN's grid interactive microgrid. And then last year we finished what Pak Syamsul Huda has presented previously, the Semau Smart Microgrid, the 450 kilowatt peak microgrid, which is PLN's pilot for the de-dieselization. And then we also finished last year the hybrid PV and diesel in Kepulauan Riau for a private company. And those two will be my focus today. I will explain on our experience regarding those two hybrids. And then this year, we also will commission the largest hybrid PV that PLN will build, which is the 1.3 megawatt peak Selayar in December. So this will be my my presentation today. The first is hybrid system planning. And then the second is we are going to talk about the case in Semau microgrid. And the second one, we will talk about the microgrid in Kepulauan Riau. And then we will have summary of the important points. So first things first, it's the hybrid system planning. So this is the hybrid system that we are going to talk about today in our discussion. So the hybrid microgrid that we are going to talk about will consist of solar PV, this one, number one, and then diesel gensets, which is number 5, and then load, number 7, and if necessary, battery, which is number 3. And we are going to talk about the AC coupled hybrid system, not the DC coupled. So what is the key issues in actually in implementing smart microgrid hybrid system? So based on our real field experience, the issue lies with the battery mostly. So sorry, the battery inverter. So there are various kinds of hybrid systems with different LCOEs, which requires different kinds of battery inverters. And not all the battery inverters that are available in the market can actually operate in parallel with the grid. Mostly they can just supply local loads. So we have to consider this very carefully in designing hybrid microgrid system. And also, as the previous speakers has told, excellence in control system is a must when designing hybrid microgrid system. So what are the steps in implementing the PV battery diesel hybrid? So the first and foremost is we have to define what is the goal and economic feasibility. So many people now in Indonesia is talking about microgrids, de-dieselization, and so many other things. But we have to be clear first, what do we want to achieve? Do we want to save fuel? Or do we want to eliminate the diesel? or do we want renewable penetration? This must be clear first before we plan. And after that, we have to define the hybrid type and the control concept, the equipments, and then also we need to do the detailed site survey, not just the PV, but also the existing gensets and the communication line as well. And also, next is we have to do the simulations, power system and protection. So this is what many people in Indonesia think, which is not entirely true, is that building PV is very easy. Yes, building PV is very easy, but when you build a microgrid, it will be different challenge than if you are building a on-grid rooftop, for example. The challenge is totally different. So all the simulations need to be done, and you also have to implement this like properly and step by step. So I'm going to talk about 3 types of hybrid PV that mostly will be implemented in medium to large scale implementation in Indonesia. The first is the leftmost. It is the 24-hour PV battery operation, where diesel is not necessary or just for backup. And then the second is the 12-hour PV diesel battery operation. In this kind of implementation, PV and battery will cover the 12-hour of the day, and the rest will be covered by gensets. And lastly, we also will have many systems, mostly big systems, where the PV is just there to reduce fuel. So in this case, the battery might not be needed. And we have implemented all of these hybrids with our clients. And for the 24-hour, yes, we can have 100% penetration. But for a small load, I mean, this load is just 1.7 megawatts, the peak load. The PV needs to be very big, and the battery needs to be very big as well. And the cost will be like 20 cents, and this can only cover like 90% annual power availability. And then for the 12-hour, yes, the PV and battery will be reduced significantly, and the cost, of course, will be reduced significantly as well. And for the no battery, of course, it will be very, the cost will be dramatically reduced. So, I want to talk next about the capacity factor and the role of the battery. So yes, batteries, actually, it can be used to store power for cloudy days. And more battery means more yearly capacity factor, more renewable penetration, but it also equals to more cost. So what is the effect of investing in more battery to increase renewable penetration? And is it worth it in terms of LCOE? So like, for example, in this example I'm giving you, for example, if we have 1 day battery, meaning that actually if we don't have any PV, we can only last for 1 day, and then we have to switch to diesel. And what if we want to reduce the diesel more? Then we can use 2 days battery. Then it will cover 2 days. But we are living in Indonesia, where actually we can have like 3 days of constant rain and everything. So should we move to 3 days battery? Well, it depends on what we are going to achieve. So as you can see in our simulation, when doing planning with PLN and the other stakeholders, we found out that for 60% capacity factor, I mean 60% of the total energy in a year supplied by PV and battery, we can get like 16 cents of LCOE. So it is this red graph where actually the PV is actually just 3.5 megawatts and the battery is like 12 megawatt hour. and this can yield 60% renewable penetration, but the cost is only 16. What if we want to increase to 90%? We found out that if we want to increase to 90%, then we have to like double the PV. And this will increase the cost like to 20 cents, because the battery will need to be big as well, like 21 megawatt hour. So from 60% to 90%, it is like 30% increase in availability, and the cost is just increased 20%. So maybe it will be beneficial. But what if we want 100% penetration? I mean, if we want 100%, based on our simulation, we need to increase the PV again to 13.5 megawatts, and the cost will be like 37 cents. So we increase 10% increase in availability in renewable penetration, but the cost will be increased like 2 times. So we are paying lots of money to counter the rare days of constant rain. It's like twice more investment for only 10% revenue gain. So this might not be very beneficial for the LCO, for the total LCOE. So these are the things that we need to think about in when we want to implement the hybrid system with battery. And next is moving from financial. I am going to explain to you about virtual generator. So in hybrid system, the most important thing is that you need to have a synchronous generator. It can be a conventional generator, or you can be a virtual synchronous generator, which can be implemented using battery inverter. So in this case, if we are going to implement a hybrid system with battery, the battery inverter should be able to should have the feature of virtual synchronous generator. This is very crucial because not every inverter can be implemented, can have this feature. So not every inverter can be used in a grid interactive system. So in order to be used in smart microgrids or grid interactive system, the inverter should be able to operate as virtual generator, which has the following features. It has to be able to be droop and grid following when following diesel gensets, and it needs to be able to be an isochronous virtual generator as well when operating standalone or when the diesel is baseload. And the mode interchange needs to be done seamlessly in order to prevent small blackouts. And as the previous speakers has described, control is very important. So any grid interactive microgrid must employ a brain, which ensures that the system operates according to design. So this can be done using a microgrid controller, which functions as the brain, and it can be a ready-to-use controller or custom controllers using PLC or DCS. And for the design, actually, we need to use proper tools in order to make a very sound design that can really be implemented. So we cannot just use Excel and simple tools, because as I explained before, microgrids is not as easily implemented as PV. Okay, so we will move to our first case study, which is the Semau Island hybrid microgrid. So in Semau Island, which we finished last year, we want to achieve this function. So we want to achieve the generation profile where PV and battery can support the grid for 12 hours or during the day, like the graph here. The green one is PV and battery, And after that, the diesel needs to be able to take the load and then operate until the morning and then change to PV again. And the interchange needs to be done seamlessly without any flickering or blackout. So in this case, we need to have inverters who can, which can implement the virtual generator mode. So this is the configuration that we have in small island. We have 450 kilowatt peak PV, and then we have 250 kilowatt battery, and the load is around 200 to 450, and we have 5 diesel gensets with different sizes. And this is the control system topology. So in this system, the topology is decentralized control. So here we have RTU in the battery side and also RTU in the diesel side. And it can operate independently, but when communication is available, the battery inverter will, the controller in the battery inverter will be the master.
Sorry,
So
your time
this is
3 minutes left, Pak Fajar.
Thank you. This is the small island PV system photo from above, and this is the implementation result. This is the SCADA reading. So as you can see, the PV and battery is the green one, and as shown by the graph, we can implement the system very successfully. So in the morning and in the afternoon, we use PV and battery, and then after that we use diesel without any blackouts. So every transition is very smooth. This is our first scenario, and we also have the second scenario where the diesel actually will act as a base load for the entire day, for the daytime. And as you can see here, the intermittency of the PV is will be covered by the battery. As you can see here, the PV keeps on going up and down, but the diesel can operate very smoothly as a base load. So this is our the implementation in small island, and the second one is in the Kepri in Kepulauan Riau. So here we actually have a system, a very interesting system where we have PV, which is an intermittent energy source, and then diesel, and then biogas. And the load is just 1,500 kilowatt, but the VRE penetration is 30%. And the load is actually industrial load, so the voltage and frequency control must be tight. The very interesting thing here is that in this pilot project, we implement no battery at all. So in that project, we try to implement a 30% intermittent power penetration without battery. So this is the system architecture. I think I will skip this one. This is just showing to you guys that all of the system is controlled in one centralized hybrid controller, and this is the key to successfully implement PV diesel without battery with high penetration. And this is the implementation result. As you can see, the green one is the PV, and we have no battery at all, but as you can see here, the frequency is very tight. Frequency we can manage like 50 hertz, and the lowest is just 49.9 hertz. So I think this is a new breakthrough for all of us, and we have shown to the Indonesian public that actually we can do a 30–40% PV penetration without battery in a conventional grid if we do the control systems right. Lastly, this is the summary of the important points in hybrid implementation. So I just due to the time limitation, I just want to emphasize in 2 points. The first one is that PV hybrid microgrid project is not an off-grid rooftop PV project. The challenge is very different, and you need to have so many experts, so many great planning, and you have to have power system engineers, you have to have genset engineers, control system engineers, and so on. Because the implementation challenge is very different, and you have to do everything properly, including the simulation before the implementation. So this is our key takeaways in our experience in really implementing the hybrid PV. I hope that our experience can be beneficial to everyone in Indonesia who wants to implement a PV battery hybrid system. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fajar, for the interesting presentation. Thank you for the sharing based on Syntek experience in planning and implementation the grid interactive hybrid microgrid. You also explained the step by step of the planning and the implementation. You also mentioned about the financial aspect, technical aspect, and also the design tool is also important, I think. Then it's also great to know that the hybrid microgrid case that handled by Syntek has also the case without the battery, and it's also a great achievement to successful to handle and the operation. Okay, as a reminder, again, the attendants have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into Q&A box in Zoom or via live chat in YouTube at any time during the presentation. So please mention your name and your organization and to whom the questions are posted. We will then collect the questions and address them during the Q&A session in our session. Okay, before we go to the last presentation, there will be another survey. So please fill the survey. It will appear for the Zoom participant. Yeah, we will discuss another 4 topics. So which one is the most interesting topic for you? Okay, thank you to fill the survey. So let's move to our next agenda, which is the last presentation in the session 2, which is Pak Kevin Marojahan. He is my colleague in ITB. So he's also a lecturer and assistant professor at Institut Teknologi Bandung. But before the presentation begins, allow us to read a brief biography of Pak Kevin. So Mr. Kevin Marojahan got his bachelor and master degree in electrical power engineering at Institut Teknologi Bandung. He's focusing on electrical power engineering. Then in 2019, he received PhD degree in electrical engineering, focusing on power system in University of Grenoble, Alpes, France. He is currently a lecturer at Institut Teknologi Bandung with 5 years experience in research and engineering, published more than 10 articles in international conference, 1 patent, 10 engineering study reports, provides 3 master theses and 4 final projects for bachelor. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Pak Kevin to deliver a presentation on smart grid concept and ITB's contribution. So please, Pak Kevin, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Bu Pradita. I hope you can hear my voice loud and clear. Sure. I will share my screen right now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. For now, it's okay. It's already seen by us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good, I would say, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time for today's presentation. So let me again introduce myself. My name is Kevin Marojahan Banjarnahor. I'm a lecturer and researcher at Institut Teknologi Bandung. So I am currently working under Power System and Grid Dynamics Laboratory together with Pradita, actually. So she's my colleague, like what she has mentioned. So today's topic is smart microgrids, concept and ITB's contribution. I would like also to appreciate the previous speakers for their nice and informative presentations. So I hope this can be a complement to the other presenters. Yeah. So the agenda, I will try to speak really quick because I have really limited time. The first one is the smart microgrids and Indonesian context, and in ITB's contribution. We will finish it with the summary of the presentation. Smart microgrids and Indonesian context, like what the other presenters have mentioned. So basically, when we talk about microgrids, based on international definitions, such as from CGRE, so this is an organization of power system experts from France. The definition is that microgrids are electricity distribution systems containing of loads and distributed energy resources. So we have loads, we have generators, obviously, and we have storage devices and controllable loads. And the most important thing is that they can be operated in controlled, coordinated way, either in connected or islanded mode. Yeah. So basically, this is just small power system, yeah. But we can consider this small power system as a unity, yeah? And they can work either in grid-connected mode or isolated or islanded mode. The other definition is given by the U.S. Department of Energy, like what Marwali, I think, the previous presenter has mentioned. So basically, it's pretty similar: interconnected loads and distributed energy resources. Within clearly defined electrical boundaries, so within a specific area, and they can it can act as a single controllable entity with respect to the grid. So the grid is macro grid. Yeah. So from macro grid perspective, from utility perspective, a microgrid is just an entity. And in operation, it can operate in grid connected or islanded mode. So basically, this is what smart microgrids means. Yeah. So we have energy sources, load centers, we have distribution systems, we have storage systems. Yeah. Sometimes we have external distribution grid or utility, but what is important is the energy management system, which can make the operation to be stable and to be affordable, or depending on the focus, actually, because we will see microgrids may have different focus for different implementation. So here's the priorities, because in different regions, the priorities could be different. In the US, like the other presenter has mentioned previously, the focus is mostly on the affordability, yeah, reliability and resilience, because they have experienced natural disturbance or natural disasters previously. So they need to ensure that the power is still there when some very not likely occurrence of natural disaster happens. Yeah. But in Europe, the focus is more on sustainability, and affordability is not really a problem. Like we see in several countries in Europe, the electricity price is really expensive. Yeah, it's increasing more and more with the more penetration of variable renewables. So right there, the priority of microgrids is to increase sustainability and also reliability, while affordability may not be the main focus. But in the developing world, in Indonesia, for example, our focus is on the affordability. Yeah, sustainability, reliability, and resilience may be one of the main important part or main focus, but it's not the first priority. Yeah. So this is what we have to understand. So with regards to that, we have different segmentations for microgrid application, starting from the off-grid. So basically, I think what Fajar has explained previously, mostly we can talk about rural areas where the operation is mostly in off-grid situation. Yeah, but of course, when the utility has constructed the macrogrid close by, I think it's not really difficult to make it able to operate in grid-connected mode as well. Yeah. So in off-grid, we can see sometimes the segmentation is on the electrification. So previously there was no electricity, and we want to supply electricity to those places, such as rural areas. So here, I would say in Indonesian context, we have a lot of cases like this, where probably the most important part is on the affordability. Yeah. And then in the US, let's say they have also off-grid segmentation, but the main focus is on the resilience. So for example, when there's blackout due to natural disasters, military bases in the US, they want to supply, still supply power. Yeah. Or let's say hospital, obviously in the US, for example, the hospital is supplied by the utility, but when something happens, for example, disturbance, we still want to ensure that the essential loads or critical loads are still supplied with this microgrid concept. Yeah. Campus as well, like that, sometimes the main focus is on the resilience. Yeah. For eco resort, let's say a small island for resort purposes, for tourism purposes, sometimes the focus is not resilient, but also electrification. Yeah. And also sometimes right here, the affordability is not really the main focus, because when we talk about tourism, yeah, the branding is also important. So the segmentation is pretty wide, but I would say in Indonesia, in Indonesian context, most of the microgrid implementation is still on the electrification. Yeah. So different focus will be achieved, yeah, like what Fajar has said previously. So in Indonesian context, I would say the focus is actually to start from no electricity, and we will move step by step to reliable microgrids. Because when we have no electricity, the activity of the population will be limited. So the human development index will be limited. Yeah, when we provide power, provide electricity to those population, they can have more activities, especially during the nights. So the human development index may be increasing. Yeah, but of course, right here, the main focus is the affordability, is that they can have power during the night, for example. So right here, the consumption when generation is available only may be acceptable. Yeah. For example, in several regions in Indonesia, sometimes the electricity is available only for 12 hours per day, or 6 hours per day. Yeah, that is acceptable because previously no electricity. Right now, we just want to provide electricity for helping people to be able to do some activities during the night. But when the human development index is increasing and then people need more reliable power, then we can increase. Yeah, we can increase the reliability of the microgrid. We can install more infrastructure to make the reliability increase. Yeah. For example, these typical community microgrids, load side is prioritized. We don't want to have more blackouts. Yeah. We want to ensure that people have electricity all time, for example. So right here, yeah, the communication and storage system may be necessary. Yeah. Typical power quality ranges, occasional outages are probably acceptable. Yeah. But when people or when a system needs more reliability, yeah, then we can increase to the upper side, the reliable microgrids. Right here, the load side is the number one priority. So when a disturbance happens in the power system, we still want to be able to ensure that the power is still there for the important loads. Yeah. So right here we have reliable microgrids. We have right here really smart microgrids. So basically, from no electricity to smart microgrid, we need to select right tech for the right application. So the devil is in the detail, obviously, because when we talk about smart microgrids, we don't only talk about simple PV systems, for example, only simple calculation about energy storage. But as we see right here, some significant changes in smart microgrids may occur. Yeah? For example, the first one, the power electronic converters are used more and more. And actually, power system engineers, they are quite used to synchronous generators, the classical way of generating electricity. And when we use more and more power electronics, the behavior, the stability of power systems may be different, yeah, may evolve. So this is one of the main challenges. And the second one is the energy storage may be required. And then the communications are obviously required when we use more and more power converters, because power converters, they do not have inherent natural behavior. So basically, we need communications to ensure that the control systems may work side by side with the other components. And then fast algorithms with guarantee of convergence may be necessary. Real-time operation may be necessary, and the stochastic nature of the primary resource must be handled well. So this is some of the changes in smart microgrids, which we have to deal with, yeah, in order to be able to operate smart microgrids well. So ITB's contribution, the first one, in ITB, we start to introduce this concept, yeah, to wider audience. It means not only to electrical power engineering students, but also to mechanical engineering students, to all ITB students, even to international audience as well. So this is the program that we conducted in July this year with participants from Indonesia, China, and other countries. So we did it in cooperation with other universities in Colombia and in Vietnam. Here we introduced the microgrid concepts and how to design a simple microgrid. So this is one of the contribution in education. Also, we have this program, Measuring Energy Supply, focusing on isolated areas, MESFIA. This program is financed by the European Union, yeah, in collaboration with other universities in France, in United Kingdom, in Greece, Thailand, in Vietnam, yeah, in Spain. Yeah. So the focus of this program is that we will run a master program. Yeah. This program will be embedded in electrical power engineering master program, but the students can choose or can select courses which focus more on the microgrids and renewable energy. Yeah. And obviously they can have some research experience with the collaborators, yeah. For example, with the Thai universities, Vietnamese universities, or as well as the European universities. Yeah. Also in ITB's curricula, we are planning on putting more courses in microgrids or smart microgrids topics. For example, here, 3 new courses, yeah, for the planned curricula, which will be implemented, if not mistaken, next year in Master Program of Electrical Power Engineering. So we have smart grids and smart microgrid course, and then advanced power system protection with communication, yeah. Also system e-mobility course as well. Sustainable energy and economics course, automation course, and then a financing and regulation course. So those courses are embedded, are created actually to answer the development in smart microgrids as well. And also in the research point of view, we also have focus on microgrids, on virtual synthetic inertia, smart energy building, yeah, with state-of-the-art facilities. So some of the softwares that Fajar mentioned previously, we have the license in our university. So basically, with the hardware and licensed software, we hope that the students have experience at least introduction to the smart microgrid, so that when they graduate, they can develop, they can work in this topic. Yeah. So this is the hardware in the loop facility, for example, because in power system, normally we only work on simulations, but with this hardware in the loop facility, we can integrate the simulation with the real controller and also relays. Yeah. For example, with new facilities such as sun simulator and then PV panels and also several modules of inverters, we can make the interaction between these PV modules and then with the relays as well. Yeah. So we have some relays right here for the protection system, and we can simulate. Yeah, we can make simulations of the microgrid right here in the computer, and in real time there is feedback between the simulation and the physical equipment. Yeah, the power in the loop feedback actually, so that we can see the interaction between the simulation and then the physical components. So this is also a really important breakthrough, yeah, in our laboratory and our research. So yeah, like what I said, in our research right now, we are trying to integrate, yeah, between the simulation and the hardwares, so they can have signal or communication exchange as well as power exchange, so that we can have real-time communication and real-time feedback between the simulation and the hardware. All right, some research output, yeah, on the smart grid and smart microgrid concept. This is just some of the research that I conducted. Obviously, in ITB, we have other researchers as well. So actually, from university and research and education perspective, we are also moving towards the smart grid development and concept. Yeah. So in summary, microgrid is identified as a key component of smart grid, which may improve power system reliability, quality, energy efficiency, and resilience. And the main focus of microgrids may vary on a case-by-case basis, like what I mentioned previously. In the US, in Europe, and in Indonesia, the focus may be different. So the development may be different as well. And Indonesia's development for island electrification, I think, must accommodate step-by-step mechanism, starting from simple electrification, moving towards reliable and smart microgrids, yeah, when it's necessary, obviously. And ITB, as a major player in technical education in Indonesia, ITB focuses on smart microgrids as well as one of the main research and education topics. This is one of the topics that we are working right now in education and research basis. Yeah. So that's all for my presentation. I hope the time is still, I don't violate the time limit. Thank you very much. I return the floor to Bu Pradita. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Kevin, for your presentation. Yeah, it is well described, yeah, the microgrid segmentation by the target and the configuration. You also mentioned some challenges to build the smart microgrid. So we hope the ITB's contribution in microgrid will continue for further research and development of the microgrid, for sure. Okay, it's time for our second Q&A session. We are now going to take questions from Q&A box on Zoom and live chat on YouTube. So let's invite Pak Marwali, Pak Fajar, and Pak Kevin to switch on the camera. And as a reminder, the webinar participant can still submit questions through the Q&A box on Zoom or the live chat on YouTube. Please also fill in the presence form posted on the chat room Zoom and the live chat on YouTube. You will receive an e-certificate for this webinar participation via email. So the webinar presentation materials also will be sent to your email. Okay. Next, we will move to the first question. It's a question from Mr. Dave from Bandung, and it's posted for Pak Fajar. The question is, when the diesel is in base load, why is the battery inverter should be in isochronous mode and the grid forming mode? So this is the question. So maybe I will repeat. The question is, when the diesel is in base load, why is the battery inverter should be in isochronous mode, and grid forming mode.
Okay. What I'm saying by baseload mode is that the diesel actually just supply active power and reactive power at a fixed export setting. So for example, we make it to export like 100 kilowatts or 200 kilowatts, something like that. So in this case, there is no one who is actually forming the grid. I mean, no one is actually making the 50 hertz and 380 volts. So the battery must be able to do this by itself. So the battery has to be the one who actually manage the grid. It becomes what I'm saying, the grid master. So it has to be isochronous. Otherwise, the frequency and the voltage will be uncontrollable.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fajar. There is another question for you. This is from Mr. Ahmed Gamil from SGB Group, Germany. The question is there a consideration of internal backup between the energy generation system in the hybrid grid in case of diesel shutdown to take over by the PV? How you manage these cases technically and commercially?
All right. So actually, if Mr. Ahmed is here, can you clarify that this question refers to the hybrid without battery or with battery? Because I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused by the question. Diesel shutdown to take over by PV. If I assume that the question means that this is a microgrid with no battery.
Could you hear me, Mr.
Yes,
Fajar?
yes, I can.
Okay, I'm sorry that texting sometimes is not that easy to explain the point. I mean, considering any case of the study you make, suppose that you are in a period of time where the diesel is working, and there is a shutdown or blackout or a failure in the diesel system in the period of where diesel should work. Are you thinking and planning that the PVC at that time with the battery should take over? However, you decide actually or design for 12 hours, as you said, as an example.
Well, yes. In that case, do you mean that the diesel is
like if you decide, if you make your design for 12 hours and suddenly under emergency condition that needs to work for 24 hours. Do you think about this, and how is the extension of cost technically and I mean commercially and technically at the same time?
Well, this is a very interesting question because this is actually what I explained in the beginning. We need to be clear on our objectives. I mean, if we design it for 12 hours, well, then yes, you only have 12 hours. I mean, other than that 12 hours, for example, if your diesel has a trouble at night, then there is no backup because we don't invested for the backup in the first place. If you want to invest for emergency power, then we need to add the capex. So the LCOE will be higher. And in this case, maybe it is wiser to design it as 24 hours. Or maybe we design 12 hours, but the developer or the utility gets more gets paid for the extra backup power investment.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Pak Fajar. So next question is still from Mr. Ahmed Gamil from SGB Group Germany. But now the question is for Mr. Marwali. The question is there a hybrid solution thought for location where a combination of conventional grid and microgrid cost efficient?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Pak Marwali.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Yes, in some cases that's possible to have this economic, benefit to build microgrid. This is the case that, like I said, that, for example, when the load is grown, is in location, it's not like economically viable for the capacity expansion, like I mentioned in my presentation earlier. So it's not really economic viable. It means like the growth is not sufficient in terms of building a new substation, for example. All right, and then in this case, utility can avoid that the cost of investment of capacity, and rather to invest on building a new substation, they can allocate that money to support the microgrid, basically. That's one case. And the other case is, for example, that where the peak load is only a few hours or few days in a year. In this case also, there's another, a good case to have a microgrid as a substitute energy to fill the shortage of energy during the few days of the year. So those are the case that where I think where utility can also subsidize the microgrid owner, and then in the end, if you look into the cost, this cost could be much more economic, right, than having the microgrid expansion or increase their capacity to meet the load, or for the 365 days, basically. So I hope I answered the question, and if not, feel free to follow up with the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Marwali. So next is still question for you. The question is why there is no indication of the microgrid benefit of safety, health, and security for utility. Less safety and less security increase the potential of failure cost. So what is your comment, Mr. Marwali, for this one?
Sorry, can you repeat again? Sorry, I didn't get it. I apologize for that. So can you repeat again?
Okay, so I will repeat for the question. Yeah, why there is no indication of the microgrid benefit of safety, health, and security for utility, which is if less safety and less security will increase the potential of failure cost.
Yes, what I mean by health is basically, of course, microgrid is really incentivize the growth of renewable energy, right? Basically, like what our other presenter here mentioned, that like Fajar said, that there's also PV play now into the role of microgrid, and then wind, and other things in renewable energy. And this is clearly in terms of that can reduce the need of transmission line, basically, because of traditional generation is mostly located far away from load center, of course, for various reasons. So consequently, I mean, clearly the benefit that we can really see in that way is avoiding this transmission line, which is really a big issue, especially in US. I mean, transmission line is really that people doesn't want to have, basically, right? They want power, but they don't want to see that transmission line across their backyard. So, of course, the reason is again for the health. I mean, basically health reason, that people think that transmission line has impact to the safety and health reason. And then in terms of any other benefit is for reducing the dependency on the conventional fuel, And as for example, I give you in New York, we have a target by 2030 to have 50% renewable energy or dependency rather than, conventional energy. So our state is already set that goal. And by 2030, New York should have rely on 50% renewable. So of course, in this case, microgrid is really something that is really a promising technology that is will work to meet that goal. Did I answer your question, or or do I have to add more? Please feel free to follow up the question.
Thank you, Pak Marwali. So maybe if you have further questions, you can put more in the Q&A box. So next is the question for Pak Fajar. This is a question from Pak Fatin from ITB. So based on your experience, is there any example of real-world implementation of virtual synchronous generator as of now, and how it performs, along with the issue, if any, for the implementation in the actual power system or the microgrid?
Yes, we have in Indonesia, in Pulau Semau. The battery inverter that we are using there is a virtual synchronous generator. So that is why it is able to operate in isochronous mode, off-grid mode or grid forming mode, and also we can operate in grid following mode, or following the diesel, and to interchange between the two modes very seamlessly. So right now in the world, actually, we have so many choices of VSG right now. 2 years ago, when we designed and implemented Semau, maybe only a handful of inverters can do that. Maybe only the big names like ABB that we used. They have Siemens and also Tesla, but right now there are many inverters, more economical ones also from China and Taiwan and everything, that can actually implement this VSG. And if you're asking about the performance, I think the performance is superb. It is the VSG that we are using, ABB, responds even faster than gensets. But the issue is, if you're asking about the issue, is that firstly, it doesn't contribute to the short circuit current. So we have, you will have many stability issues when it's operating in by itself, in the grid forming mode. And the second one is that actually you cannot offer you cannot operate it above the rating. You see, with a conventional synchronous generator like gas engine or diesel engine, I mean, if you have a fault in the system, I mean, small intermittent fault, short time fault, for example, in the village, you have this bare copper cable and some banana leaves dropped, and it shorted the two conductors. Then you will have several seconds, maybe only 10 or 20 seconds of it being face-to-face fault, and then the leaves burned, and then it dropped, and then everything is clear. In this case, if you're using a conventional generator, the generator will run above the 100% capacity, maybe until 200 for 20 seconds, and it's okay. It's just that the generator will sound very, very strong. I mean, it will go very loud, and people are panicking, but it's still still running, and there is no blackout. And if it is like only a short time for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, then after it clears, then everything goes back to normal. With battery inverter, you cannot operate above 100% capacity. So if the same fault happens, the leaves dropped, and then the battery needs to operate 120%, then you get a blackout. That is non-negotiable in power electronics. You cannot do anything. So this is what I'm saying to PLN, like actually some of the PLN planners, they presented me with some some design. They are designing a 12-hour system where the load is 2 megawatts, and they will implement a 2 megawatt battery inverter over there to take over the load during the day. And I told them that you need to make it double, because if you don't make it double, any small disturbance, then the grid will go blackout. This is not a diesel genset. You cannot run it above the rating, it will trip. No negotiation in that. So this is the thing that all of us needs to understand. Okay, we need to reduce cost by minimizing all the components size, but if we are going to have stability, then the battery inverter must be 2 or 3 times the maximum load. I mean, the size must be that. If not, then we will have stability issues and reliability issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very clear. And it's good to know that we already have the virtual synchronous generator in our system in Indonesia. So maybe we will move to the next question. For the next question is to Pak Kevin. The question is come from Mr. Ahmed Gamil from SGB Group Germany. So the question is, do you have plans to extend your programs to North Africa, Pak Kevin?
Okay, thank you for the question. It's really interesting. About the plans to extend the programs or cooperation to North Africa. Actually, right now, we have contacts actually to North Africa, but not direct. So through Université Paul Sabatier, so through a university based in Toulouse, France, because France has a strong relation to Maghreb countries, to North Africa, and we have relation to France. So basically, we will be working actually on a program about lighting systems, to be exact, about LED control systems. So the challenge is that in Indonesia, for example, in islanded power systems, the frequency and voltage stability might be not really good. So how lightings may respond to that will be really important. So this will be one of the topics that we will be working together with Toulouse and with the North African universities. But in the future, obviously, if we have possibilities, we will work on that, obviously. I think Pradita will agree with me, right, Pradita? Thank you.
Sure, of course. It's a good possibility for sure. So maybe we can move to the next question. This is also for Mr. Kevin. What are the different stability issues in the smart microgrid, compared to the conventional grid?
Smart microgrids, let's say. Based on my experience, I think Pak Fajar will have more clear answers on that. But when we talk about just normal microgrids or small power grids, which will be based on diesel gensets, normally the problem is frequency stability. It means because the capacity of the gensets are normally not really far away from the peak load. For example, when we have peak load of 5 megawatts, probably the gensets is only, let's say, 2 times 3 megawatts. So basically, when we lose one genset, then we have stability, frequency stability problems. Will be susceptible to blackouts. The same thing, I think, for smarter microgrids, frequency stability will still be an issue when we talk about contingency cases. For example, when one genset faults, or when there is disturbance on one genset, or when we have disturbance on the grid former, I think the problem is mostly about the frequency and about the actually, when I talk about frequency, it's mostly about how to balance between the production and consumption. So that's the main issue when it comes to power system stability. And also, when we have smart microgrids, we have communication tools, and we will have controls which will rely in communication. And I think one of the main problems also is about the control stability. Actually, in newer IEEE publications, they have included not only angle, frequency, and voltage stability, but also control stability. So basically, when we have parameters which are not really stable, for example, or we have communication problems, sometimes, well, we still have power, but due to the difficulties in interaction between the control interface, so we can have instability, but not because of the power, but because of the control issues. I think that will be all for my understanding, mostly frequency or related to balance between power and consumption, especially during disturbance in generators. But obviously, right now, like what Fajar has mentioned, because we have more and more developments in technology, I think real-time dispatching for gensets, for example, is already there. So we have centralized control, which can dispatch the generator, and then it can obviously overcome the intermittency of photovoltaics. So frequency stability when it comes to variability, probably right now we have solution. But for, let's say, tripping of generator sets, diesel gen sets, grid formers, for example, I think that will still be a challenge. And in ITB, actually, we are also working on that protection systems. What we know, or what we mention right here, we know it as adaptive defense scheme. So basically, this defense scheme will use the real-time data. So from real-time data, we will have different decisions for different fault cases. So basically, we are also trying to work on that. Also, from Fajar had said previously, limited fault currents, that is also really interesting. When I did my PhD in France, actually, this is also one of the problems that they have often mentioned, because power electronics, they have really limited short circuit capability. When you violate the limit, then you will break the equipment. So we can also obviously control it in our own way, because power electronics are basically, they do not really have any inherent behavior, so we can just control it. For example, during faults, we can just, let's say, reduce the voltage. Yeah, this is one of the possibility. And then we can limit the current produced by the power electronics. So basically, from the voltage and current, we can also identify which whether or not there is fault or not. Yeah. So from this direction, actually, we are also trying to overcome the short circuit and the protection issues in power system or in microgrids. Sorry to really talk a lot of things, but to answer it really shortly, I would say the problem is frequency stability and also control stability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Kevin, for very clear explanation for this stability issue in smart microgrid. And thank you also for Mr. Marwali and also Mr. Fajar for all of the answer for the questions in this Q&A session. But sorry, it was the last questions for our last Q&A session due to the time we have. So if you have any questions we didn't have time to answer on today's webinar, please contact speakers at the address shown on their slide presentation. We have a recording of this webinar on YouTube channel MKI IEPS. Okay, thank you for all the speakers. So next, we will show the result for the poll that we have held before. Yeah, this one is the first polling. So do you think the microgrid will massively deployed in Indonesia? Yeah, mostly answer sure. So next polling. For the most interesting topic is the most one is the battery energy storage system. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, the smart grid implementation and strategy. And the second one is the battery energy storage system. Okay, so the next one is the last question of the poll. So which one is the most interesting topic for the next webinar topics? So the most is the digitalization and distribution automation and also smart city. It's very tight presentation. Okay, thank you for your polling. So I would like also thank you so much for all of the speakers, and also thank you for everyone who attending today's webinar on smart microgrids for the future of sustainable power. So as mentioned earlier, today's webinar is the 6th episode of MKI Smart Grid Webinar Series out of 10 episodes hosted by the Indonesian Electrical Power Society or Masyarakat Ketenagalistrikan Indonesia, taken place in April 2021 to January 2022. It's supported by PT PLN Persero and sponsored by Tide, Huawei, Kepco, Hitachi ABB Power Grid, Siemens, ABB Sakti Industry, Trilliant, Wärtsilä, LS Electric, GE Grid Solutions, Mitsubishi Power, PT Indonesia Comnet Plus or Icon Plus, and in partnership with Think Smart Grid France and Energy Academy Indonesia or ECADIN. So on behalf of the Indonesian Electrical Power Society or Masyarakat Ketenagalistrikan Indonesia, thank you for joining today. We hope to see you all in the next episode of MKI Smart Grid Webinar Series that will be held on 13th of October 2021 on Smart City. We will keep you all updated on the detail via email. If your company is interested to be a sponsor For a speaker in the next MKI Webinar Series on Smart Grid, feel free to contact us at mki.secrt@gmail.com. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.